The door slammed shut behind me, the echo of Mom's scream still ringing in my ears. Ungrateful. Get out and never come back. My heart pounded as I stood on the porch, the summer air thick with the scent of jasmine and betrayal. At 20, I thought I knew pain, but nothing prepared me for the sting of being cast out by the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally. I clutched my backpack, stuffed with a few clothes and my laptop, and glanced back at the house that had been my home for 2 decades. The white paint was peeling, the windows dark, as if the house itself was turning its back on me. I'd always been the difficult one, too headstrong, too opinionated, too unwilling to bend to Mom's endless rules and expectations. But this fight, this explosion, was different. It wasn't just about me forgetting to do the dishes or staying out too late. It was about years of unspoken resentment, her belief that I was wasting my life, and my desperate need to prove her wrong. It started that morning, over breakfast. Mom had been sipping her coffee, her eyes scanning me like I was a report card she didn't like. "Lila, you're 20, she'd said, her voice sharp. "No job, no degree, just sitting in your room writing those silly stories. When are you going to grow up?" I bristled, my fork clattering against the plate. My stories weren't silly, they were my escape, my dream, my way of making sense of a world that often felt too heavy. I'd been working on a novel, pouring my heart into every word. But to her, it was just a childish hobby. "I'm trying, Mom," I'd said, my voice low but firm. "Writing is my path. Why can't you believe in me?" Her laugh was cold, cutting. "Believe in you? You're throwing your life away. Lila, you're ungrateful for everything I've done, sacrificing, working double shifts, keeping a roof over your head." The words escalated, spiraling into accusations. I was lazy, selfish, a burden. And then, in a moment of fury, she'd screamed those final words, banishing me from her life. Now, standing on the street, I felt the weight of her rejection. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my best friend. "Mia, you okay? Come to my place." I wiped my tears and started walking, each step a mix of fear and determination. I wasn't just leaving home. I was leaving behind the version of myself that had always tried to please her. If Mom thought I was ungrateful, I'd show her I could survive without her. But deep down, I wondered if I was strong enough. Mia's apartment was a small, cluttered haven in the heart of the city. She opened the door, her curly hair a mess, her eyes wide with concern. "Lila, what happened?" she asked, pulling me into a hug. I spilled everything, the fight, Mom's words, the way my chest ached like it was caving in. Mia listened, her presence a lifeline. "You can stay here," she said firmly, "but you need a plan. You're not just running away, Yuri, starting over." That night, I lay on Mia's couch, staring at the ceiling. Starting over sounded empowering, but it was terrifying. I had no job, no savings, just a half-finished novel and a stubborn streak. But something shifted in me, a spark of defiance. If Mom thought I was nothing without her, I'd prove her wrong. I'd make my writing work, not to spite her, but to show myself I could. The next morning, I woke with a purpose. Mia helped me set up a profile on a freelance writing site, and I spent hours crafting pitches for small gigs, blog posts, product descriptions, anything to get my foot in the door. My first acceptance came that afternoon, $50 for a 500-word article on local coffee shops. It wasn't much, but it felt like a victory. I was doing this on my own. Days turned into weeks, and I threw myself into work. Mia's couch became my base as I hustled, taking every gig I could. I wrote late into the night, my novel growing alongside my freelance portfolio. But every quiet moment brought memories of Mom, her tired eyes, her calloused hands, the way she'd hum old jazz tunes while cooking. I missed her, but I was too proud to call. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post from a local writing group about a short story contest. The prize was $1,000 and publication in a literary magazine. My heart raced. This was my chance to prove my writing wasn't just a hobby. I spent days crafting a story about a girl searching for her place in the world, pouring my own pain into every line. When I hit submit, I felt a rush of hope. Weeks later, an email arrived. I'd won. My story would be published, and the prize money was mine. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. I wanted to call Mom, to tell her I wasn't a failure, but the memory of her words stopped me. Instead, I called Mia, who screamed with excitement. "Lila, this is huge. You're doing it." But as I celebrated, a part of me ached. I'd left, just as Mom had demanded, but I wasn't sure if I was winning or just surviving. I wanted her to see this, to know I was more than ungrateful. Little did I know, fate was about to bring us face to face again, in a way neither of us could have predicted. The literary magazine's launch party was in a quaint downtown bookstore, its shelves brimming with stories that felt like old friends. I stood in a corner, clutching a glass of cheap wine, my heart pounding as people milled around, flipping through the issue that held my story. At 20, I was the youngest writer there, and every glance felt like a judgment. But when a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a warm smile, approached me to say my story had made her cry, I felt a surge of pride. I was doing this, really doing it. Mia was by my side, beaming like a proud sister. "You're a star, Lila," she whispered, nudging me toward a group of writers who wanted to meet me. I was mid-conversation, explaining my inspiration, when I saw her. "Mom." She stood near the entrance, her coat draped over her arm, her face a mix of shock and something I couldn't read. My stomach twisted. What was she doing here? I hadn't seen her in 3 months. Not since that awful morning. I'd heard from a neighbor that she'd been asking about me, but she hadn't called, and neither had I. Now, here she was, in my moment of triumph. Part of me wanted to run to her, to show her the magazine with my name in print. Another part wanted to turn away, to protect the fragile independence I'd built. She approached slowly, her steps hesitant. "Lila," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I saw the announcement online. I didn't know if you'd want me here." Her eyes darted to the magazine in my hand, and I saw a flicker of pride, quickly masked by uncertainty. I wanted to scream, to ask why she'd pushed me away, but the crowd around us made me swallow my words. "I'm here now," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "What do you want, Mom?" Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I saw the woman who'd raised Meddard. Fierce, flawed. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "I didn't know you were doing all this." She gestured vaguely at the bookstore, the magazine, the life I'd started to build. The conversation was cut short by the event host calling me to the stage for a reading. As I read my story aloud, my voice shaking at first but growing stronger, I felt Mom's eyes on me. The story was raw, about a girl who felt unseen, who fought to carve out her own path. When I finished, the applause was warm, but all I could see was Mom, standing at the back, tears streaming down her face. Afterward, she approached again. "That was beautiful, Lila," she said, her voice thick. "I didn't know you had that in you." Her words were a knife-part compliment, part reminder of how little she'd believed in me. "You never asked," I replied, sharper than I meant. She flinched, and I saw the weight of our shared history in her eyes. We didn't talk long. The crowd pulled me away, and she left quietly, her silhouette disappearing into the night. But her presence lingered, stirring up questions I wasn't ready to answer. Did she regret what she'd said? Did I want her back in my life? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the connections I was making, writers who offered me contacts, editors who wanted to see more of my work. My world was expanding, but Mom's shadow loomed large. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into writing. The prize money gave me breathing room, and I moved into a tiny studio apartment, my first real space. I decorated it with thrift store finds, each piece a symbol of my independence. But late at night, when the city was quiet, I'd think of Mom, her sacrifices, her struggles, the way she'd always pushed me to be better without ever defining what that meant. One day, a letter arrived, forwarded from Mia's address. It was from Mom, handwritten, the ink smudged in places. She wrote about her regrets, how she'd been scared I'd fail, how her own dreams had been crushed by life's demands. I didn't mean to push you away, she wrote. I just didn't know how to let you be you. I read it over and over, torn between anger and empathy. She'd hurt me, but she was hurting too. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I poured my feelings into my novel, letting the characters wrestle with the pain of broken bonds and the hope of reconciliation. Writing was my therapy, my way of understanding us both. But as the days passed, I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. The question was, could we rebuild? Or was the damage too deep? The city was alive with autumn's chill, leaves crunching under my boots as I walked to a cafe to meet an editor who'd reached out about my story. My novel was nearing completion, and the literary world was starting to notice me. But even as I sat across from the editor, discussing potential publishers, my mind drifted to Mom's letter, still unanswered on my desk. It was a weight I carried everywhere, a reminder of the rift I wasn't sure how to bridge. The editor, a sharp woman named Clara, leaned forward. Lila, your voice is fresh, raw. Readers connect with that. Have you thought about a memoir? I laughed, caught off guard. My life's not that interesting, I said, but she shook her head. A young woman defying the odds, finding her path after being kicked out. That's a story. Her words hit me hard. Was that who I was now? A survivor? Or was I still just a girl running from her mother's rejection? Back at my apartment, I pulled out Mom's letter again. Her words were raw, vulnerable, a side of her I rarely saw. She'd written about her own mother, who'd pushed her to marry young, to give up her dreams of being an artist. I didn't want that for you, she wrote, but I didn't know how to let you chase your dreams without losing you. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it didn't erase the hurt. She'd chosen to push me away instead of talking to me. I decided to write back, not to forgive her, not yet, but to understand. My letter was short, honest. Mom, I'm building a life, but I miss you. Why was it so hard to believe in me? I mailed it, my heart racing, unsure if I wanted a response or silence. Either way, I was done hiding from the truth. Days later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Mom. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. Lila, can we talk? In person. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to protect myself. But another part, the part that remembered her singing to me as a child, bandaging my scraped knees, said yes. We agreed to meet at a park near my old neighborhood. Neutral ground. The park was quiet, the air crisp. Mom was already there, sitting on a bench, her hands clasped tightly. She looked older, her hair streaked with more gray than I remembered. When she saw me, she stood, her eyes searching mine. Lila, she said, I'm so sorry. The words were simple, but they carried years of weight. I didn't know how to respond, so I just sat beside her. She told me about her fears, how she'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat after Dad left, how she'd seen me chasing writing and worried I'd end up like her, full of regrets. I thought pushing you would make you stronger, she said, tears falling. But I pushed you away instead. I listened, my heart torn between anger and understanding. You didn't trust me, I said finally. You made me feel like I was nothing. Her sob broke the silence. You're everything, Lila. I just didn't know how to show it. We sat there, the gap between us both vast and fragile. I told her about my writing, my small victories, the life I was building. She listened, really listened, For the first time, when we parted, there was no big resolution, just a tentative promise to keep talking. Back at my apartment, I felt lighter, but the work wasn't done. I dove back into my novel, using our conversation to deepen my character's struggles. Writing was my way of processing, of turning pain into something meaningful. But I also started calling Mom once a week. Small steps toward rebuilding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. One evening, Mia dragged me to a local open mic night. I read a news story, one inspired by Mom's letter, about forgiveness and second chances. The crowd's applause was warm, but what caught my eye was a familiar figure in the back, Mom, smiling through tears. She'd come, uninvited, just to hear me. For the first time, I felt seen. Winter settled over the city, blanketing the streets in snow and muffling the noise of my racing thoughts. My novel was finished, and Clara, the editor, had connected me with a small press interested in publishing it. The prospect was thrilling, but it came with a new kind of pressure. Every word I'd written felt like a piece of my soul, and now it would be out in the world, judged by strangers. Yet, even as my career took shape, my relationship with Mom remained a fragile thread, one I was learning to weave back into my life. Our weekly calls had become a ritual, awkward at first, but growing easier. She'd ask about my writing, and I'd ask about her job at the hospital, where she worked as a nurse. Sometimes, she'd share stories about her patients, her voice softening as she described their struggles. I began to see her not just as Mom, but as a woman who'd carried her own burdens for years. Still, the memory of her words, "ungrateful, get out," lingered, a scar that hadn't fully healed. One snowy afternoon, Mom invited me to the house for dinner. I hesitated, the idea of stepping back into that space both comforting and terrifying. But I agreed, driven by a need to face the past. When I arrived, the house smelled of her famous lasagna, the kind she used to make for my birthdays. She greeted me with a nervous smile, her hands twisting a dish towel. "I'm glad you came," she said, and I nodded, unsure what to feel. Dinner was quiet at first, the clink of forks loud in the silence. Then she spoke, her voice low. "Lila, I've been thinking a lot about what I did. I was wrong to push you out. I was scared, but that's no excuse." Her honesty disarmed me. I wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt, but I saw the pain in her eyes. "I just wanted you to be proud of me," I said, my voice breaking. "But it felt like you never were." She reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. "I was always proud, Lila. I just didn't know how to say it." We talked for hours, unraveling years of misunderstandings. She told me about her own dreams, how she'd wanted to paint but gave it up to raise me. I told her about the fear I'd felt leaving home, the drive to prove myself. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was real. After that night, our relationship shifted. Mom started texting me snippets of her day, small things like a funny patient story or a photo of her garden. I sent her drafts of my novel, nervous but hopeful. When she called to say she'd read the first chapter and loved it, I cried, not from pain, but from something softer, something like hope. Meanwhile, my novel was moving forward. The publisher offered a contract, modest but real. I signed it in a daze, hardly believing this was my life. Mia threw a small celebration at her apartment, complete with cheap champagne and a cake that said, "Lila, the author." I laughed, but the joy was tempered by a nagging question. Would Mom be there when the book came out? One day, while revising my manuscript, I got a call from the hospital. My heart stopped when I heard Mom's coworker on the line. "Lila, it's your mom. She's okay, but she collapsed at work. Can you come?" I grabbed my coat and ran, fear clawing at me. At the hospital, I found her in a bed, pale but awake. "Just exhaustion," she said, trying to smile. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine, and neither was I. Sitting by her bedside, I realized how much I'd taken her for granted. Even after everything. You need to take care of yourself, Mom, I said, my voice firm. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm trying, Lila. For you. That night, I stayed with her. And for the first time in years, we felt like a team. Spring brought new beginnings. But it also brought challenges. My novel's release was set for summer. And the publisher was pushing for promotional events readings, signings, even a small tour. I was thrilled but overwhelmed, juggling edits and interviews while checking in on Mom, who was recovering from her collapse. She'd cut back her hours at the hospital, and I'd started visiting the house more often, helping with small chores. Our relationship was healing, but it was still a work in progress. One afternoon, while we were planting flowers in her garden, Mom turned to me. Lila, I read your whole book, she said, her voice quiet. It's incredible. I see you in every page. I froze, a trowel in my hand, unsure how to respond. Her approval meant more than I wanted to admit. Thanks, Mom, I said, my throat tight. She smiled, and for a moment, we were just a mother and daughter, not the broken pieces of our past. But not every moment was easy. Sometimes, old tensions flared like when she questioned my decision to quit freelancing to focus on the novel. It's risky, Lila, she said, her worry echoing the fights of old. I took a deep breath, reminding myself she wasn't attacking me. I know, Mom, but this is my dream. I have to try. She nodded, and though I saw the fear in her eyes, she didn't push. The book launch was the biggest test. It was held at the same bookstore where I'd read my short story, now packed with friends, writers, and strangers. I stood at the podium, my novel in hand, my heart racing. Mom was in the front row, her face glowing with pride. As I read the opening chapter, I saw her wipe away a tear, and I nearly lost my place. This was the moment I dreamed of, but having her there made it real. After the reading, people lined up for signings. Mom waited until the end, holding a copy of my book. Will you sign it for me? She asked, almost shyly. I laughed, taking the book. To Mom, I wrote, who taught me to fight for what matters. When she read it, she hugged me, and I felt the weight of our past lift. Just a little. But life doesn't tie up neatly. A week later, I got an email from a reviewer who'd torn my book apart, calling it sentimental and immature. The word stung, bringing back every doubt Mom had ever voiced. I called her, expecting her to say, I told you so. Instead, she listened, then said, Lila, one person's opinion doesn't define you. Keep writing. Her words were a lifeline, proof she was trying to be the mother I needed. As summer approached, I started planning a trip for the book tour. Mom surprised me by asking to come along for the first stop. I want to see you shine, she said. I agreed, nervous but excited. The night before we left, we sat in her kitchen, sharing coffee and stories. She told me about her own dreams again, how she'd started painting again in secret. Maybe it's not too late, she said, and I smiled. It's never too late, Mom. The tour's first stop was a success, with Mom cheering me on from the audience. Watching her clap, I realized something. We were both rebuilding, not just our relationship, but ourselves. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but we were walking it together. The book tour took us to new cities, each stop a whirlwind of readings and signings. Mom was there for the first 3, her presence a quiet anchor. She'd sit in the audience, her smile a mix of pride and awe, as if she was seeing me for the first time. Between events, we'd explore, sharing small moments, ice cream in a park, laughter over a missed train. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes, we'd snap at each other, old habits creeping in. But we were learning to listen, to forgive. Back home, I settled into a rhythm. The novel was selling modestly, enough to keep me afloat. I started teaching a writing workshop at the community center, inspired by the writers who'd mentored me. One day, a shy teenager approached me after class, clutching a notebook. "I want to write, but my parents think it's a waste," she said. I saw myself in her, and I told her what I wished Mom had told me. "Your voice matters. Keep going." She smiled, and I felt a purpose beyond my own dreams. Mom was painting more, her small canvases filling the house with color. One evening, she showed me a portrait of me, my face lit with determination. "This is how I see you now," she said. I hugged her, tears in my eyes. Her art was her way of healing, just as writing was mine. We were both chasing dreams we'd once thought lost. But life threw a curveball. Mom's health took a turn, nothing serious, but enough to scare us both. At the hospital, I held her hand, promising to be there. "You don't have to do this alone," I said, echoing her words from months before. She squeezed my hand, and I saw the strength that had carried her through years of hardship. As she recovered, I invited her to my workshop. She sat in the back, watching me teach. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "Lila, I'm so proud of you. Not just for the book, but for who you're becoming." Her words healed a part of me I hadn't realized was still broken. I thanked her, not just for that moment, but for everything: the fights, the love, the messy journey that brought us here. One night, I found an old photo of us, taken when I was 10. We were laughing, arms around each other. The world simpler then. I showed it to Mom, and we talked about the past, not with regret, but with gratitude. We'd both made mistakes, but we'd also found our way back. A year after that fateful fight, I stood in the bookstore again, this time for a reading from my second novel. The room was packed, faces familiar and new. Mom was in the front row, her painting of me framed on the wall behind, a surprise she'd arranged with the bookstore. As I read, I felt her love, not just in her presence, but in the journey we'd shared. After the reading, a young reader asked how I'd found the courage to keep writing. I looked at Mom, her eyes shining, and said, "Someone once told me I was ungrateful and to get out." I left, but I didn't give up. And that someone, she's here, cheering me on. The crowd applauded, and Mom's smile was brighter than the spotlight. Later, we walked home together, the city alive around us. "Lila," she said, "I'm sorry for that day, but I'm glad it led you here." I nodded, taking her hand. "Me too, Mom. Me too." We'd been broken, but we'd rebuilt something stronger: trust, love, and the courage to be ourselves. My novel ended with a dedication to Mom, who taught me that even the hardest goodbyes can lead to new beginnings. As we stood under the streetlights, I knew we'd both been stunned by what followed: that scream, not just my success, but our second chance.